of the team and all the work that they all do. If you have been to an arena academy, I was at the one in Houston in 2019, which was also a very fun, wild experience. And like just mentioned, we are talking about site-based vote tripling today. Site-based vote tripling is a tactic that Vote Rev developed in order to find a way to reach the voters that we all need to win in just a new kind of clever way. It's built on a lot of traditional relational organizing tactic and methodology. It seems super simple, but we love to say that there are like just great best practices on running an SBVT program, and we are going to get into all of that. I am first going to start with sharing my screen and just sharing. Meeting is being recorded. Okay, great. Sharing the screen. We have team members as well as Arena in the chat. So we will be looking at the chat as we're talking as well. And just got to start it off with this, but if you have not already, whoo, my trigger finger here. If you are not ready, if you have not done this already, let us know, who you are, where you're, joining us from, what organization you're with or campaign, and any fun facts about you. It is always fun to see all that. And this is a massive group so far. We're at 81 people, guys. That is fun. That's also a fun fact, bigger than some weddings. So this is really fun. But again, we are going to talk a little bit about site-based vote tripling. I want to start with taking a step back and talking some logistics. So we have the Q&A feature. We have a Q&A feature for folks to use because we're such a big group. It's really helpful if you submit questions via the Q&A function. We will be monitoring that and we'll do our best to answer questions in real time. And at the end, we'll have at least 10 minutes for questions as well. There will be time at the end. And then this webinar is being recorded and will be shared with you after. And so you can, view it again if you want to see all our faces, hear what we're saying. You can send it to folks on your team, etc. We'll start with some introductions. We'll chat a little bit about what site-based vote tripling even is tactically, like what it looks like. How we know it works. We've done quite a bit of research on this tactic. How to set up a successful GOTV program. We'll have some time for the review and discussion, and we'll do a quick closing. Oh, apologies. And then we'll talk about how Vote Rev can help you guys run this program. If you have worked with us in the past, welcome back. We're happy to see you. If you're new to Vote Rev, I'll also share a little bit about who we are. But ultimately, by the end of this webinar, we really hope that you walk away with knowing how site-based vote tripling works, why it's a powerful tool to mobilize harder to reach voters that you want to reach and are maybe having a harder time reaching with traditional GOTV tactics, what it's like to run an SBVT program, what obstacles you might encounter, how to overcome them, and the materials you'll need to run a successful program. A little bit about us. My name is Ani. Ani Kelemjian, she, her. I'm the Deputy Director of Partner Success here at Vote Rev. Hey. And I have been here for about 4 years. My team members, Roderick, as well as Marisa, are joining as well. You'll hear from all of us a little bit. And Roderick will be in the chat navigating if folks have questions or want to reach out to us. Again, try to use the Q&A feature if you have questions, but if there's small things to address, we can do that as well. Before we get started, who here has heard of, just maybe a hand or notes, who here has heard of or used vote tripling before? Any type of vote tripling? Tiffany, I knew your hand was going to go up. I love that. Okay, quite a few folks. That is awesome. I'm seeing a lot of hand raises, which is funny because I have the screen on one side, so it's just like hands coming up on people's screens. Okay, great. You guys should do this with me. But vote tripling essentially was the tactic that we were mainstreaming in mainly 2020. And it essentially is one way of relational turnout to get folks to remind their friends to vote. We have iterated on this tactic since, and so there is, just a little bit more nuance to it. The version of it we're going to talk about today is called site-based vote tripling. I have a little bit of a disclaimer. This has nothing to do with 3 anything anymore. The recommendation here is to ask folks to remind 5 of their friends to vote. That is the TLDR of everything I'm going to say. But tripling is a conceptual idea for us at this point and less of a best practice recommendation. And we'll talk about it. A little bit about Vote Rev. I mentioned that we started and worked on scaling vote tripling. Now we have a few other tactics under our belt. We are a team of behavioral design experts as well as campaign experts. And we worked with in the off cycle in developing and testing various easy to use tactics. And in the on cycle, like this year, helping campaign partners across the progressive space implement them into their programming. Again, we have design expertise and, kind of a unique combination of campaign, nonprofit, and industry design expertise. And, this group of folks kind of developed vote tripling and specifically SBVT to address a common challenge. And the challenge is that, traditional GOTV tactics are super effective and deeply valuable, but they can't reach all voters. So we know that research suggests that 1 in 5 Americans are either incorrectly listed or missing entirely from the data that we use to build our contact lists. So the work we do knocking doors, calling and texting voters is critical, but there are just natural gaps in there. And not everyone we want to reach can be found in our voter rolls. And even more than that, many folks aren't responsive to cold campaign messaging. So our goal is to have a tactic that is easy to scale that will help soften the burden of those barriers, right? The solution that we're going to talk about today is a tactic site-based vote tripling. You're going to hear me say the full name or just SBVT. More likely the latter, but this is what we're referring to. And the reason SBVT helps fill this gap is because it's essentially relational organizing at scale. We've taken the concept of just talking to your neighbors because people are the best messengers to their friends. They are the most effective communicators and the most trustworthy people to the people closest to them. And we've put some best practices and programming around it. This is specifically relational turnout and mobilizing as well. Doing site-based vote tripling, you can average about 50 relational contacts per hour, particularly on a college campus. You can average more than 32 on just any traditional high traffic location. We have had partners who have far exceeded these metrics. And if we are working together, we can kind of help give some best practices to that. But ultimately, we found I mentioned we have some research and design folks on our team. We've run a randomized control trial on this tactic, and we found that it increases voter turnout on the friends who are receiving a timely reminder by about 0.5 percentage points. If percentage points or the language of RCTs or research is new to you, we are going to go over that in just a minute. And Marissa is going to go in a lot more depth about how we found that out and how we ran our test about this. But first, I want to just share with us what site-based vote tripling is. It is a tactic that has kind of 3 quick parts. It's a high traffic, impersonal, relational turnout tactic. It's conducted during early vote and on election day. So this is only done during a voting period. Canvassers, it can be paid or volunteer, stand outside of high traffic locations. Can be college campuses, traditional high traffic locations, events, things like that. They stop pedestrians and passersby and ask them to right then and there remind 5 or more friends to vote. Folks take out their phones, they send reminders. We'll share some information about things they can send to make the reminder more effective, things like that. But they send the reminders to their friends. The canvasser makes a note of it, offers them an incentive for doing so, and that's it. The most important part about this is that people are getting a reminder from someone they trust when it matters most. So towards the end, the closer we get to GOTV, the closer we get to election day, everybody is getting more and more cold campaign messaging. And the people who are able to cut through that noise is someone who has a close relationship with them, right? With our voters. And so that's essentially what the tactic is. Stand outside of high traffic areas, ask people to remind their friends to vote, make sure they do it. And this can be done either in a partisan or nonpartisan way. I'll share after we talk about research, I'll talk about how it can be done in a partisan and nonpartisan way. I'm mainly going to talk about the partisan today, but it can be done in either way. And we've had our testing, in fact, was done in a nonpartisan way. But this works because we're asking people to remind their friends to vote, because every election, millions of people don't get asked to vote. Either they're missed on the voter rolls or they're just unresponsive, right? I forgot is probably the top reason people didn't vote in 2020. And Black and brown folks, low-income voters are less, and low-income voters are less likely to be on the lists of voters who get invited to vote. So there's a gap in how we're in our voter files and how we're building our lists. We are hoping to reach harder to reach voters with this tactic. And in this election, we like to think we have a superpower. I know it sounds kind of corny, but relational organizing has always been thought of as community building. And so we're taking a little piece of that really hard work and kind of a chunk of that and applying it to a program like site-based vote tripling. Friends have 100% contact rate with their friends. That's why this works. People trust their friends more than they trust a canvasser who they don't know. And this is where the partisanship comes in. Left-leaning people will turn out left-leaning people. This is also true in other cases. People tend to turn out people like them. This is what all of our research shows. I think we probably know this, right? And social pressure works. We keep seeing studies about this. It keeps being really effective. We know it works. So we do what our friends do, and we're trying to kind of capitalize on that. When we say it's relation mobilizing at scale, I want to share just a little bit of a visual of what that could look like. If you have canvassers do 1 hour of site-based vote tripling, the canvasser can get about 6 to 10 people to remind 5 or more of their friends to vote. Ultimately, that can result in, over 50 reminders sent to friends per hour. So your canvasser is only talking to these people, but all of these folks are getting the timely reminder about the election. And we have data showing those are the people that you may not be able to reach otherwise. I've mentioned that we've tested this. This is a tested tactic to reach young and hard to reach voters. We have results on this. And I'm going to pass it to Marisa to tell us about it.
Thank you, Ani. Paul, I see your question in the chat, and it's a great one. And I promise you, we will get to that before the end of the session. But how we know vote tripling works, Ani, if you may go to the next slide, please. So the short answer is we ran a randomized control trial of this tactic in the 2022 Georgia runoff. So the world's shortest overview on randomized control trials, basically they are the gold standard of research. It means that you had a treatment group that got the treatment, in this case, a text from a friend reminding them to vote, and you compare that against a control group, i.e. a group of people who did not at all get that treatment, and that way you're able to say that the treatment caused the effect as opposed to just a correlation. So we ran this in 2022 with a paid canvas firm in the Georgia runoff. Ani, I think if you can go to the next slide, we have some stats on what we did. We had 15,000 mobilizers. So those are the people who remind their friends to vote. We matched 45,000 people back to the voter file. And we had in-field randomization. So basically the way this worked is our canvassers were armed with a platform called Grassroots Unwired, which is effectively a mobile voter file. Everybody in the state of Georgia was pre-randomized to either be, yes, text your friend, no, don't text your friend. If I saw Ani on the street and I was like, hey, can you remind your friends to vote? And she was like, sure. And I was like, great, who are they? Let's say she's like, well, one of my friends is Roderick Smith. And, I, as the canvasser, would look up Roderick in the voter file right then and there. Because he has a pretty common last name, I might, confirm his address or something like that with the canvasser. And he would literally have something next to his name that was either yes, remind, no, don't remind. And if he ended up in that no, don't remind group, we would just have the canvasser tell the person like, hey, actually, your friend's on a do not call list. Like, who else do you got? And that's how this worked. It actually worked really well. And we found a statistically significant positive result of 0.51 percentage points. So that was pretty cool. Next slide, Ani. Because we, for the first time, really in Vote Rev's history, matched the people who got the reminder from the friend back to the voter file, we were able to learn all this cool stuff about them. For those of you who heard of vote tripling in 2020, the most common question we got is like, well, how do you know who you're reminding? How do you know who the friends are? And the great thing about this study was that it finally answered that question, like, how do you know who the friends are? So because we did all the voter file matching, we were able to learn a bunch of cool stuff about the friends. Namely, they skewed younger. The median age of a friend was 36 years old. We ran this both on and off college campuses. The median age of a college friend, like a friend who got a text from somebody who was encountered on a college campus, was 27. 37% of these people did not vote in the 2020 presidential election. What was mind-blowing to me, 52% of these people had not voted in the midterm election literally weeks prior to this special election runoff. 46 didn't have a phone number on the Target Smart voter file. So again, that meant that like if you were using that voter file and you were trying to cut a phone universe, if you were trying to cut an SMS universe, these people wouldn't have appeared. And a full 41.5% had a model turnout score lower than 50, meaning that a whole bunch of these people were probably just excluded from a GOTV universe because, the very, very, very quick and dirty way that people cut GOTV universes is high partisanship, middling turnout. And a lot of times in resources constrained environments, we as a movement do not do a great job of even including these people in our universe. But they were included as the friends because, again, like friends have a 100% contract rate with their friends, and people aren't exactly picking their friends because they have a turnout score between 0 and whatever. So this just really has a wide breadth of who this can reach. The other cool thing we did, Ani, if you can go to the next slide, is we contracted with our friends at the Democratic Data Exchange, who I know some of you are on this call, so thank you again for existing and for doing this analysis for us. Ani, I'll let you just throw up all the points. But, we asked the Democratic Data Exchange to look at the friends who were contacted by site-based vote tripling and compare it to essentially other data within the Democratic Data Exchange. I will let the folks from DDX chime in with what they are and how to explain themselves in the chat if they want to, because they will do a much better job than I will do. But basically, they are a clearinghouse for democratic data, knowing who gets contacted by who and how. And when they looked at our friends, the people who got a text from their friends, they found that a full 23.8% of friends contacted by SBVT during our RCT were attempted at least 7 times by progressive groups in 2022, but were never actually contacted. And again, why was this contact successful? Because as we like to say, friends have a 100% contact rate with their friends. So we found that this was effective to turn out both high potential voters, basically like voters that are hard to reach and voters that are hard to nudge. And then we had some pretty good numbers about the ability of this tactic to contact younger voters, BIPOC voters, female voters. Again, part of this is just where we were. Like we ran this in Atlanta and suburban Atlanta and Savannah. So part of this is also just reflecting the demographics of the area, but we still thought it was pretty promising. Ani, I think those might be all my slides, but I'm happy to take questions if folks have them. Ani, are there questions in the chat that you think I should answer?
Yes. Can you talk about if we've done trials in or near apartment complexes, specifically to turn out those voters since they're rarely canvassed, which is a great idea.
Yeah, great question. So one really cool thing about this is like where somebody is intercepted within the canvassing interaction, whether it's at like the public park or the Walmart or the bus station, where they actually live can be like miles and miles and miles away. We don't actually have this slide, but like we have mapped kind of where the mobilizer is and where the friends are. And we literally found, for those of you who are from Michigan in the chat, that like by intercepting people in Detroit, we could contact voters in Grand Rapids and Lansing and the Upper Peninsula. You know what I mean? I think like if I wanted to run this program, I would hang out outside of an apartment complex in an urban area and just think about that as a location, because you're absolutely right. Like if you're in a a dense neighborhood and you can't get into a locked building, like great, make your high traffic location hanging out outside the apartment complex. And that's something that that Ani can talk about a little bit more. Ani, are there other questions I should answer?
I'll just respond to Eva's out loud. These slides, this recording and the slides will be available. And I'll add to the question about, we do have a partner this cycle who has a series of, they do year-round organizing and advocacy. They have a set of low-income apartment complexes that they work with, that they have a very good relationship with. They are setting up a small table with little incentives inside of the apartment complexes and asking folks to remind their friends to vote there. And so depending on your level of access to apartment complexes, I think if you're an organizing organization and you have relationships, utilize those. It's a great idea. If you do not, I think Marisa, everything you said, just validating everything you said as well. If
Ani, are you cool with me answering Paul's questions really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Paul, I see your question in the chat, so I'm going to take them really quickly. Number one, how responsive are people to this appeal? Are we asking folks who just voted themselves? This ask converts roughly 1 in 3. So roughly 1 in 3 pedestrians that you're like on the street and you're like, you know, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? Asking, remind your friends to vote. Ani's going to go through the script and watch my way better than that. Roughly 1 in 3 say yes. So this also just becomes really fun for canvassers and for first-time volunteers. Are we asking folks who just voted themselves? Sometimes we are. The kind of 1.0 version of site-based vote tripling was called polling place vote tripling, where we specifically encouraged people to set up shop outside of polling locations to ask recent voters to remind their friends to vote. This is just kind of, by doing it not exclusively at polling locations, you get more sites and therefore contact more people. Of course, you can still do this at polling locations. How many people have 5 people off the top of their heads that they can remind? Short answer, a lot. Longer answer, we part of what we coach people on is how to actually get people to remind 5 or more friends if they can't think of anybody first. Obviously, there's a lot of ways you can prompt them, and I'm sure Ani will go into more of that later. Ani, anything else I should answer?
I don't think so. And if you want, I wrote out a response to that question as well in the Q&A, so you guys can read that there as well. It will be there for live viewing. There is a question about VotePro that I am just taking a second to read, and of course, making sense of announcement for new, but I'm also curious about whether there are any other additional needs people can think about where VotePro can support. This is not a great answer to your question, Siamala, only because I haven't fully read it as I was talking. I saw this. But VotePro reminded me that one of the high traffic locations you can think about for SBVT is polling locations. What works really, the reason that works well is because you're kind of taking on, no, don't apologize. This is a fantastic question. It's because you're taking on, like you're talking to people who have like just voted. So there's a little bit of like, there's a high there a little bit. If you're doing this in a partisan way, you want to be outside of electioneering limits. There's laws to that, of course. But we have worked with campaigns in 2022 where in places where they knew their VotePro team had the capacity to do this, they either added 1 more person to those sites or had their VotePro team also make this ask. And that worked quite well. That is not true for everywhere because voter protection is a full-time job in many swing districts. And so just flagging that you can have, this is something that is effective to layer into like VotePro as well, especially if you're talking about early voting sites and polling locations. And if you add someone else there, that can usually help solve for capacity. If that didn't entirely answer your question, please put it in the Q&A and I will address it. But yeah, thank you, Marisa, for that. I know you might hop off. I really appreciate you joining for this. If you guys have other researchy questions, we'll try to get to what we can. And what we don't get to, we will put our contact information. You guys can just reach out and feel free to ask. And we'll go through more of it with you. I have lost the Q&A on my screen. Here we are. Okay. So we are now going to talk about just what it looks like just functionally to run an SBVT program. You know, I always like to say it's deceptively easy. We've all likely run high traffic programs before. It's very similar to those because it doesn't take a lot and it doesn't need a very long and doesn't have need a very long runway to plan this program. It seems deceptively easy, but there are just some really good best practices that will make this most effective to turning out your voters. And I think make volunteers, especially if you're running a volunteer program, feel the best so that you have higher reshifting rates. One of the things we find is volunteers really like to do this because there's like immediate gratification with doing this tactic, and it feels successful. And so we've heard, anecdotally, we've heard that this has a pretty good reshifting rate if you start an early vote. So that's just a little tip. I mentioned earlier that you can do this either in a partisan or a nonpartisan way. And there are just a couple of differences in running the programs in both ways. We help partners. We have folks on our team who work with C3 nonpartisan partners. We have folks who work with C4, and we will and coordinate it. And so we are structured to help folks of all different organization types. Because there's a blend here, I will focus more, like I said, on partisan during this call, but I just wanted to pull out that you can make differences in how you run your program that can make it partisan or nonpartisan. Those include, if you're doing partisan work, and we hear this all the time, how do I know I'm not turning out Republicans? You should use partisan signaling. Wear shirts, have swag, have your campaign gear, ask people to remind Democrats, be in Democratic areas. That's where you should target, right? People self-select out, and people often remind their friends. Sometimes we don't get people to remind 5 friends if it's more swingy, because folks say, oh no, I'm not gonna remind my dad or my cousin, because they're not gonna vote like us, and then we don't push them to. They can remind their Democratic friends. In a nonpartisan way, you would just have generic voting reminders. The swag you might have might be like stickers on voting, or fun. I ordered a wilderness pack of stickers, and that's what I used the last time I did this. It was super generic, and it worked great because we were doing it in a nonpartisan way. You can have it be focused on an issue if you are an issue organizing. You just ask people to remind 5 or more friends, period. You do not have a qualifier of partisanship there. And select high traffic locations in the communities you want to reach. So be where you want to be. Whereas if you're doing this in the partisan way, you're going to select more Democratic locations. So that is a difference. Just wanted to highlight, you can absolutely run this program to meet the goals of your work. And we are structured to help folks do that. But I am going to focus just a little bit on the partisan ship today. Okay, things. Okay, things you're going to need to run an SBVT program. Again, deceptively easy, but there is just some process and thought. There's just some things you want to think about when you are running this program. Like anything else, you're gonna reach more voters, or you're gonna get as many voters as you intentionally try to reach, basically. So this can be a last minute ask for volunteers that you train up really quick. We have great training videos and resources to get people trained last minute, send them somewhere to do if a volunteer doesn't want to do anything else. But if you want this to have a impactful, to be impactful, I would just spend a little bit of time building a goal, selecting the number of locations you want to go to, maybe the number of shifts you want to have. We have high traffic lifts on our end. It will be nothing compared to what to your local knowledge, but we do help with all of this. But you want to make a plan. So pick high traffic locations, recruit volunteers or canvassers. I'm going to say canvassers as I talk. I mean volunteer or paid. We've seen both happen. It has it comes with the same successes and drawbacks that volunteer and paid work does. Schedule training, prepare materials. This is where we help partners the most. We have all of this for folks. Determine how you're going to collect data. I think many people here are very, very intentional about the data you want to collect from your programs and how you communicate impact. We can help you with that, but have a plan for that. This is slightly different than programs where you know exactly who you're reaching. So the way you're going to communicate impact is different. And then allocate incentives. There isn't a lot of cost to this, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but you do want to have some incentives. We do snacks, we have stickers, we have campaign swag. People have a lot of leftover swag the closer you get to election day and tend to use that. I think is quite clever. But that's kind of the things you want to think of when you're building your program. Not entirely different than building any other high traffic, like voter registration or petition gathering program. And most importantly, we're sharing all this, and I'll share how we help partners in the end. But because we help people, we are structured to exist to help campaigns and organizations implement tactics like site-based vote tripling at scale, even if it's within a short amount of time. So if you want to do this, but you think it's too late, we can figure out what is the best way to help you with this and how involved we need to be, or we can be. and help you run it before early vote starts, particularly for election day. We have a little bit of a runway for election day, so we can definitely make this happen. I'm going to pass it to Roderick, who is going to share a little bit more about how site-based vote tripling looks on the ground and location selection. Before we move to that, there is a question about what type of methods are most accurate with data collection. I will share a little bit more about data later. What I will say is we don't always recommend that you try to match everybody you're talking to a voter file. Only because of the decrease in contact you have. Marisa is typing an answer right now. Anything she doesn't cover, I will cover later in the data section. Okay, Roderick, take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here again. My name is Roderick, pronouns he, him. I'm going to talk about how does SBVT work. Pretty much when you hear me talking, and you'll see next, you'll be able to actually see SBVT in action, on which I think is really helpful. But I want to make sure that you look for, when watching this video, the SBVT setup, and then also how canvassers get to help and to send text on the spot, and then they record data. Those are two important things that I want you guys to look for in this video. Next slide, please. So here you'll be able to see SBVT on OSU's campus.
And this was done last fall, obviously in Ohio, and we have some of our great partners and friends at Swing Left who helped with this.
We're doing a giveaway to encourage folks to get out and vote ahead of Tuesday's election.
Once early voting begins, the single most powerful thing a person can do to boost turnout is remind their friends to vote. Vote Rev has designed a tactic that can get millions of people to do just this in 2024. It's called site-based vote tripling, or SBVT. It's a simple and powerful way to ensure we're connecting with the hardest to reach people with a strong voting reminder and final crunch before election.
If you take a picture of this, text it to 5 or more friends, then you can help yourself to anything you like off our table.
SBVT is simple. Canvassers at high traffic locations like college campuses ask pedestrians to immediately text 5 or more of their friends to remind them to vote, offering an inexpensive treat like a bag of chips as an incentive. Then many people do it. That's it.
Take a photo of this, text it to 5 or more friends, have to see you do it, and then you can grab something off the table. People are reminding their roommates to go vote. We've got kids who are really excited to send it to their group chat. It's from their mom. It's from their roommate. It's from someone in their study group. Those don't go to your spam folder. You don't unsubscribe from those.
It's crazy effective. I can't think of many ways you could invest resources that are going to be a higher bang for your buck than something like this.
Paired with other tactics, SBVT reaches almost 5 times the number of people over the same time period, and it reaches them through the best messenger, their friend. Research finds that people who get voting reminders through SBVT are, in fact, more likely to vote.
My hope is that on just about every campus in a competitive district, we've got organizers who are trained in this and are doing this nationwide. It'll result in much higher student voter turnout, which is exactly what we need to win next year.
By trading campaigns and voter turnout organizations to get SBVT done across key states in 2024, Vote Rev can get tens of millions of friend-to-friend voting reminders sent, which can net enough votes to make the difference in close elections.
We're doing a giveaway to encourage folks to get out.
We're back. I apologize for my choppy Wi-Fi connection. I think that is why we were having video issues, y'all. Marisa did drop a link to our website in the chat, and you can watch the video on our homepage, so it is available. Robert?
Yes, thank you. One of the most important things as well as watching that video is that when the young lady was doing on Ohio State University's campus, when she was doing, she actually stood there and watched to make sure that they actually sent the text message. And so I wanted to make sure I pointed that out. Next, what I'm going to go over is the SBVT script in 5 simple parts. So the most important thing is that intro, making sure that you grab their attention. You'll actually see an example here on the screen, and it says, "Hi there, can I have a quick minute of your time?" That's a good intro. I usually always like to use something, especially if I'm out there and it's weather and it's hot. I say, "Hey, hi, it's a hot day. then I'll intro into something, but that's a way to like intro to start a conversation. The next important piece is to make the ask and offer an incentive. An example that we have here is, can you text 5 or more friends who vote for Democrats right now and remind them to vote? Next, another thirdly important, observe them sending the reminders. I just mentioned before the young lady in the video, she observed them and made sure she watched to see that they sent the reminder before they walked away. Fourth, ask how many people they reminded. So this is very important, and you'll see the example here is it says, great, and how many people did you remind? That helps you keep up with that and helps you keep up with how many people that you actually reached. Lastly, and then most importantly, is always, always thank them. An example that's used here is thank you so much. Together, we can make a big impact this election. Next slide, please. Success looks like canvassers observing people texting their friends on the spot. And as I just mentioned before, in the young lady, she did just that. And that's most importantly, especially when training teams who are doing SBVT. Next slide, please. Picking effective locations. Locations is so important because if you pick a good location, in particular, a high traffic location, you reach more people. Next slide, please. Look for these factors in a SBVT location. Number 1, lines and natural bottlenecks. Number 2, public and accessible property. 3, places where people gather. 4th, anywhere community meets. So that looks like events. That looks like public places where there are like bus lines, or here in Atlanta, we have the MARTA, which is our train system. So think of places that are good for voter registration or petition gatherings. Next slide, please. Now here we have examples of good SBVT locations, some that I just mentioned, but college campuses are a big one. You saw that in the Ohio State University, video, public parks, skate parks, city buildings, in particular, city hall or courthouses, libraries, campaign events / rallies, block parties, also big festivals, and also last but not least, community centers. Next slide, please. So now I have a question that if I would like everybody to answer in the chat or ask, where are successful high traffic locations in your community? I know we have people from a lot of different places here, so I would love to hear about some high traffic locations in your community where you live.
Wait, beach parking is so good. I've never heard anyone say that. Chico State. Wow, y'all, these are so good. And I want to validate what Roderick said. Who here has not stood outside of a Walmart to register voters? Who here has not got kicked out of a Walmart for registering voters and gone back the next day hoping it would be a different manager? And so we are not the Girl Scouts. We get kicked out, but even like where maybe the Girl Scouts go is like a good idea. Obviously depends where with the location and your communities. Oh God, Aziz. This is so good.
I'll also flag, I once asked this question and somebody said, what if you just got on a public bus and rode around it and asked everybody who got on the bus? And it's like, I love the scrappiness in that,
God, I love that. Okay, roll them in, you guys. This is so good. Also, I feel like anytime we mention like Walmart, it has like the best, like a positive triggering response where it becomes like a community, like somber chat. Like it's like all of us sitting here, like remembering our work together, which is so funny. These are great. Guys, we often recommend places. We like brainstorm with partners sometimes. Something that happens when we work with partner organizations and campaigns is that everyone is so busy, but we focus on this one way of supporting folks. So on a call with us is often people's one chance to like stop, think, and dedicate time to plan. And so it sometimes just turns into like a thought partner call. And that if that is what our value add could be, we are happy to play that value add. But I will be keeping some of this in mind for sure as like recommendations for people. This is awesome. Okay, Roderick, anything to close us out?
I'll be in the chat answering questions as well as the Q&A Q&A section.
Great, thanks, Rod. Okay, we just talked about locations. We've talked about what site-based vote tripling looks like in real life. Let's talk about some of the materials you need. I mentioned earlier that this is deceptively easy. One, because when, you know, it can seem like a super easy last minute thing, though it does take some thought to plan. And it seems like maybe it has no budgetary needs. That is true with a caveat. This can be as cheap or as expensive as you want it to be. You saw in the video we shared that on Ohio State University's campus, there was a huge issue 1 like sign, and that's because they were doing voter registration. They were then doing SBVT. That team chose to have that sign. You do not need a sign like that, but if you have the budget and you want to do that, that is awesome. If you want to have a little table for folks to set up at and train them not to like just hug the table, but move around, have that. You do not necessarily need those things, but we'll walk through some examples of what are some best practices. I will tell you, when our team does this, we have a clipboard and some stickers and we just walk around and do it. So depending on the skill of your canvassers, how energetic they are, how much you have time training people, you can get away with doing this with a little bit more, or a little bit less rather. So some things you want to take a look out for that you may want to have is maybe some signage. I think this is most helpful if you are doing partisan work or issue-based work, because it draws people to you naturally as well. You know, during a hook and an ask, you know, when you're talking to people in the beginning of the conversation, folks can look at signage to help them understand what you're asking them to do. You can have something that says, we had little signs that said like, remind your friends to vote in front of the incentives. And so people knew that they had to remind their friends to vote, and then they could be directed to grab something off the table. This can help reinforce what you're doing and that you're not asking for money or selling something, which is also helpful. Again, not a need to have, but definitely a nice to have. We would have incentives to sweeten the deal. Incentives, and remember, you are not giving somebody something to vote. You're offering somebody an incentive to remind their friends to vote. That is critical. Also, this means that people who aren't eligible to vote can still take part in a site-based vote tripling. This is really effective for folks who are not eligible to vote yet, either because of their immigration status or their residency status, or they're not old enough. Or this is really good for folks who are ineligible because of the laws in a state that prevent folks who have been previously incarcerated for voting. So there is usually not a way to take action and, you know, help with turnout in those instances. But luckily with site-based vote tripling, if somebody says, I can't vote, that's not what we're asking of them. We are asking them to remind their friends to vote, and they certainly have friends and family who can't vote, most likely. The incentives that we recommend having are truly based on whatever you have available, you have the budget for, and make sense for your community. On college campuses, particularly on Ohio State universities, they are really organized on that campus. They spend a week or two prior polling students on what they would want to take action on something like this. And a lot of kids said energy drinks, which I think is an epidemic on its own. Somebody else should handle that. But they got Celsius, which I don't know if you guys have tried. It's not great, but like a lot of people were using Celsius and the kids loved it. The young adults rather loved it. And that went really well. People were coming to the table asking what they can do to get the Celsius. But Celsius is not a cheap incentive. That's not scalable for many places. So if you're on a college campus, you have the money, do it. If you don't, once the Celsius ran out, we just had like cookies, generic Halloween candy, like these boxes of Welch's, a Costco pack of Gatorade. I mean, I literally had a cheap bag of Halloween candy and people still came up to get it. So you don't need an expensive incentive. It can help for more nervous volunteers, but you know, you don't necessarily need that. I think it's useful, but not necessary. I'm not trying to dissuade anybody from Celsius. I know, listen, some folks want it. And just again, highlighting this last point, it's for reminding friends to vote, not voting. I will also say we've done this with high quality stickers. And young people particularly love a sticker to stick on a water bottle. It works quite well. And we've done it at farmers markets with stickers, and adults suck it too. So if you have stickers lying around, use those. There you go. Okay. The next thing you can have is create a flyer that makes taking action easier for mobilizers, and it helps get key info out. After, how do I know who's getting a reminder question? The question we get most often is, but how can you make sure what they're saying is even effective? Because many of us on campaigns are so used to hyper engineering the messaging that's going to our voters. Our highest recommendation is that to get the power out of relational work, you want people to talk to their friends the way they normally talk to them. I know all of us want them to have certain information. So what we have tested quite a bit of is, and found success with, is having a very simple kind of like standout flyer, like the one you see here, that says something about where to vote, how to vote, maybe a helpline or something, and then has like a call to action. So what we tell people is just tell your friends, just say, remind them to vote in however you would say it. And we turn the clipboard and we say, you can also take a photo of this and send it with something simple like go vote. And the vast majority of people will take a photo of the flyer and literally send the words go vote, which is so good. And our flyers, we've done a couple of versions of them. This is our cutest one. We have made them ourselves and we have no graphic design skills. So I've made one without fun glitziness. And I think it was still okay. So don't let your graphic design skills or lack thereof stop you. But it is really helpful to have a flyer. We can also, if you're working with us, we can also give you a couple of examples that you can just edit and add your information in. I'm sure we have a template for this. Ooh, that also, the clipboard is also really useful because you know when you're doing VR and you put a clipboard in front of somebody and they just like take it while you're talking, the same thing happens with that. So it's really useful. So in training, train canvassers in the same way. And then the things we like to include on the clipboard, again, are like when to vote, early voting, election day. Election day is the same everywhere. Early voting is different. Where to vote. And you can have like one or two things about what's on the ballot, depending on what matters to you. But you should definitely arm your canvassers with that information. So if you're not putting it somewhere, having it like printed on a one pager or something on the table that people can grab, make sure your canvassers are able to talk about it. So when you're thinking about what materials you need to plan, just make sure this information lives somewhere for your folks. And then something that I didn't mention, I mentioned but don't have a visual of, is people will sometimes have tables. If they are tabling in the same place over and over, they'll have tables. That is really useful, I think, on places that have consistent foot traffic, but is not necessary. So if you have the budget for it and the cost for it, do it. It'll probably make volunteers feel good. But if, otherwise, this will still be effective with just a clipboard and walking around. We do not ask, I'm going to answer one of the questions in the Q&A. We do not ask the mobilizer if they have voted. We have in the past when we've done a version of this. And what we do is we will say something like, after they remind their friends, because that is the top part, we know that this has an impact on the mobilizer themselves. And so we don't have data on that, but we do know that it does have some uptick. Actually, Marisa, do we have data on the mobilizer's impact? No, okay, I'm right. But we're using a little bit of social pressure, assessment here and know that it has some impact. After they follow through and they send a reminder, you can train your canvassers and add it to the script to also ask, and have you voted? And if it's useful for you to track how many of the people you are reaching have or have not voted, and it could be useful. I could see some world where that is. I would add that to your data sheet and train it in your script. But we don't recommend it as just part of this tactic, but that is totally an amendment you can make if it's important to you. And I can see value in it. Okay, now we're going to talk about data. We talked about the data, how to collect data. This is somewhere where we get the most questions and work with partners the most on developing their plan for SBVT, because the data you collect here is not the same as you would maybe in other tactics. What data points are important for you guys for other traditional like voter contact tactics, like doors, phones, SMS, other high traffic work. I'd love to get a sense of like what types of data points you are really valuable. And while folks put them in the chat, I will talk about a little bit about what this could look like in SBVT. This was a question that came up earlier, and so I don't remember who asked, but I hope this answers it. There you go. Usually, some data that we collect, or in maybe canvassing, or other traditional voter contact, is number of attempts, number of contacts, yeah, who they're supporting, the voting plan, things like that. SBVT data collection that we recommend, you can certainly do more, but what we recommend to make sure you talk to the most number of people and are able to communicate your impact at the end, after the election day, is to collect a number of folks that your canvassers talk to and the number of friends they reminded. And I'll share what that could look like. But the way we're thinking about what we recommend for data is both so you can see how to measure your impact, but also so that if you're doing this during a few shifts during early vote, you're doing this on election day, your first few shifts will give you a sense of what locations are effective and what aren't, which ones maybe aren't at those times. So it also helps you test and pilot your program in real time and iterate on it so that it's the strongest it can be towards the end, the closer we get to election day. The data that we recommend tracking is how many people said nope and did not remind their friends, how many people said yep and sent reminders, and how many relational reminders were sent in front of you. We recommend asking the first two so that especially if you have paid canvassers, which there is some other QCing there, quality control things there, that if you're working with us and you're doing this with paid canvas, let's talk about. But we recommend having canvassers tally how many folks said no and how many folks said yes, so you can get a sense of their conversion rate and know what to retrain on for the next shifts. So if you are having a lot of people have significantly more no's than yeses, that means there's probably a little bit of training that needs to be done on what a no is. Also, how to get people to actually follow through and send messages in front of them. Because what's likely happening there is people are saying they'll do it later, they'll remind friends later, and walking away. Again, we work with partners to look at their data every shift, and we'll be able to point out what the issues could be and offer retrainings. But that's the reason we recommend these two. The number of friends who receive reminders is sort of your impact number. So the number of relational reminders are sent in front of you. You saw in the video at OSU's, she asked, and how many people did you remind? That is the number that's what canvassers ask. I cannot remember a time, and I've done many, many hours of this. I can't remember a time when someone did not tell me or show me their phone. And I don't ask to see their phone. So it's a bit surprising how free people are with this. Your canvasser writes down the number, they have the total. What that means is you now know how many relational reminders you have generated through your SBVT program. On the back end for us, we can usually do some assessment or a short write-up for you to place that in the context of your work. That's just a conversation we have with partners, kind of partner on partner basis. But these are the things we recommend people track. What this could look like is this. So this is like a completed sheet someone would turn in. Let me populate these. So this is the, this is the completed sheet they might turn in. Depending on how many canvassers you have, you will have another step here where maybe there's a Google form, or maybe there is another voter data collection method. Maybe you loop us into it and we take a look at your photos of your paper forms, something, right? A question I get a lot is, but how do I know who we're reaching? Why can't I match those people to the voter file? I can share more about that if that is a concern later. But the highest level answer is you are going to talk to far fewer people and need an app, like a relational app that matches to the voter file, things like that. So the barrier to entry for this being successful is much higher in that case. something that you'll always emphasize with folks is that their shift is not over until canvassers report data. There is our adage in the space of like, it doesn't exist in van, it doesn't exist. The version of this is, if you have not entered your data, you have not done a shift, right? Like that is something you will train people on. We train people on. We have, if you are using our data collection methods, we have videos that you can send to people of like, remember to do this. So we're hopefully taking some of that off your plate, but there is some data management to this. I want to take a step and look at the questions here. Marisa is answering Asim's question of how do we tabulate larger group chats. Marisa, I'll let you answer that. Sabrina asked, measuring your impact, track your data. Is this on paper or is this digitally? It is on the data collection sheet like this. This will be printed and on their clipboards. You should then have folks find a way of submitting that. You should then have folks submit it to you on the back end. Bigger programs will have something like a Google form with just these questions, where they were, the time they were there, things like that. And then, you know, smaller programs, you can just have people enter their data, if you have a smaller team, into like a Google or Excel spreadsheet. You can probably, if you desperately want to use an app you have, there's a workaround that likely exists to help you capture this information. I don't have the answer for all of them off the top of my head, but there likely is one that we can find. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. We're coming to a close.
Do you mind if I jump in really quickly with something about the group chats?
Yes, please.
So we actually, group chats is a question that we get a lot, and we actually did a bunch of survey experiments trying to figure out how many people are in the average group chat. Because again, like going back to first principles, the reason this works is because someone is getting a message that they trust from another person, right? So like the trust inherent in the relationship is like, A, why the person looks at the message at all, because friends have a 100% contact rate with their friends. But it works because it's kind of that like one-to-one, right? So like we're totally fine if people want to send reminders in a group chat, but it kind of depends on the group chat. So like at some point, if like I remember we were doing this once and somebody was like, they were a freshman at college and they were like, yeah, I'll send it to my group of 135 people. We're all in an onboarding cohort together. It's like, that's no longer relational because that's no longer a trusting relationship. And so in situations like that, we'll be like, great, but like, are there also like a few people you can remind individually? We found that the average group chat has something like 4 people in it. For us, a number that triggers suspicion is like anything more than 10. So like I was doing this once and somebody was like, yeah, can I send it to my group chat of 25? And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like what kind of group chat is 25 people? And they were like, oh, well, it's my intramural soccer team. And it's like, okay, like you're probably all friends, you probably know each other. That's like probably still trust. Again, the way that you code that is like if you're doing pen and paper, we'll circle group chats just so we can know. We find that on college campuses, if you run this, about 80% of messages will be sent in group chats. Off college campuses, that number drops literally by half to about 40. Whether or not you even code that it happened in a group chat just depends on if that is a metric that is important to you to track, but you don't even have to code that that was how the message was received, just that there were X people in the group chat and therefore X reminders got sent.
Yeah, that's a great flag. And what I'll add is that if you are concerned about QCing, this is sort of a way around it, but you can have someone on the team periodically skim data sheets and see like paper sheets and see if there is someone who is commonly putting like, you know how they write an integer for how many friends someone reminded. If you are seeing 50, 60, 100 integer number being written, that is likely a massive like Slack thread or group chat that does not count. So you can gut check that that's like a very soft way of QCing. I'm going to share a little bit more. I'm going to share a little bit about, I've talked about how Vote Rev helps partners do this. I'll share a little bit more about explicitly how we help folks. Roderick will put the way to connect with us in the chat. We will also follow up with this information. Please reach out if you think that we can be of any help, if you want any materials here. If we get a lot of inbound requests, it will take me until the end of next week to respond to you, but I will respond. We will, you know, if it makes sense, we'll schedule a call and we'll figure out how we can best help you. Certainly. And again, I know we're getting close to early vote and election day. Everybody still has time to run this to some degree. So if you are interested in including this in your program, we can help you see what the right balance of how much we take on and how much you do, and we can help you with this. And so we have the web form. Roderick, are you able to put it in the chat? Great. And the way we often, if you're thinking about like, well, what can you even do for us? The way we often help with folks, with our campaign partners, is we help with like planning, goal setting, timelines, tracking progress, things like that. Regular coaching. This is variable among partner need, but sometimes, like I said, it's helpful. In the past, in 2020 and 2022, many of our partners said that our call time was really useful because it's the one time you can kind of dedicate your entire like 20 or 30 minutes to just one thing. And we like played a thought partner role. But we can figure out what training materials you need, schedule trainings for your folks. Training is the thing that we, I would say, have the most expertise in, particularly for this tactic. We have loads of different, training videos, training materials, implementation things, all that. We can help with provide guidance on data collection. We had a partner last week who was concerned about how to track data and do QC with paid Canvas with just paper forms. So we figured out how to like a solution to that with them, which was specific to their needs and an app they're using. So we're happy to think through that. All of the materials we have, we can share with you. We can make bespoke materials depending on what you need. And then we can help with like targeting high traffic locations. I mentioned we have our internal high traffic locations for all 7 of our target states. We work in swing states. There's all the states you're thinking of likely that are swing states. And we have a structure to help folks across our swing states, regardless of campaign type. And we do help with high traffic targeting and polling location targeting. What I would say here is our targeting help can only go as far, it can only go so far. We can provide the infrastructure for tracking locations and things like that, but you all know what's best in your communities. We can just kind of give you a baseline for that. But that's often the ways we help partners. Yeah, and I wanted to leave that there. How to connect us with us is in the chat. Please send me a message that connects directly. I will get that in that web form connects directly to my email. And so I will get your requests and send responses. And we do have a time for some questions to answer. I'm gonna type out the question we have in the chat right now, but does anybody else have any questions or anything that we can address while we're on the phone?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So next week, my group is already going to be tabling at Chico State, mainly to get people to register to vote, since we have very like low voter turnout in our district, since it's mainly all college students who move here and don't ever really register to vote in our county. I'm just kind of wondering what the best way, because I know that you said that this tabling works best like closer to the due dates and it's more to just remind people to vote. If we were to adapt the system in a way to like register people to get people to register to vote, do you have any suggestions for that?
Yeah, specifically, do you mean if you can get people to like remind their friends to register to vote?
Right.
I think we have tested this. We have some anecdotal things we can share. What I would say is if you are open to using a link to send to people, because you're at Chico State, because it's young people, like for all the reasons you said, they likely do know people, like they like factually know people who are not registered to vote, especially at their current address. You can try the version of this, which is like, hey, are you registered to vote? Do your first ask, because that's probably your priority. And especially for people who say, no, I'm already registered, follow up with like, who are 5 friends you can think of who aren't? If 5 feels aggressive, go down to like 3 or something. But yeah, I would try that and then stand there and watch them send the link for voter registration to their friends.
Okay, sweet.
Yeah. Yeah, you could have a QR code actually for them to scan to track how many people are scanning it if you need something trackable. I'm not totally sure if you do or not, but that could be one thing you do.
Okay, sweet. Sweet. Those are kind of the same lines as I was thinking of. Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will just jump in because I in a past life was very intent on voter registration. I think a QR code makes a ton of sense to a message that they could copy paste. Just be like, you can scan this, you can copy paste this message in and send it. Or if you just want to print it out, and you know how you can like take a picture and copy the text from the picture, just having the message that you want them to send would be huge.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Sabrina, how can you become a partner? This may have already been answered, addressed. Do you have a list of those swing states that you mentioned? Is Texas on the list? Texas is not on our list. I'm so sorry. Still email me and I'll send you whatever resources we have to run this. Email me and ask questions and I'll answer. We are not structured to provide support in Texas. Marisa, my understanding is that has not been changed. Yeah, great. I would have known about it, I guess. Yeah, our swing states are Arizona, Nevada, or our target states are Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. If that was all 7, I'm missing somebody, and my apologies to them. I hope that helps answer your question. But still email me, I'll send you materials. Yeah, Tiffany, that's a great idea. We can have a Texas group to link up. Sabrina, I might direct you to Tiffany, but Jess?
Yeah, I was gonna say a plug for our arena Slack. We do have a Texas organizing channel. And we are going to be rolling out, you're hearing it here first, some new things in Slack. So you should be able to use our arena Slack to support your organizing. And if you're not in the arena Slack, just email us and we'll get you in there.
Great. I don't see why we would keep people longer than needed. If no one else has any questions, please reach out to us. Again, we're here to help. I really hope that folks are able to run successful SBVT programs this year to reach those voters that you are just having a harder time reaching with traditional voter engagement tactics. We can help you layer this before or after a door program as well. It gets particularly more effective the closer you get to election day, so that's really lovely. Yeah, reach out to us. I will answer your call or your email. And thank you so much for joining us for this. Thank you, Arena, for having us, and you will get a copy of this webinar as well as other information post call. Yeah, thanks everybody. Have a great day.